In a previous life, I was a philosopher, and I've been having some thoughts about emergence for a number of years, and I would like to share with you today some of those thoughts and how they may relate to innovation. Systems or networks fall into three regimes. The first regime is one of order, where solid structures and hierarchical systems organise everything with a beginning, a middle and an end. Entropy reigns and stagnation is the promise. The second regime is one of chaos, where the certainty of order ends and small initial changes have vast avalanching effects. The frozen certainties of the first regime have melted away. The third regime is a complex one, the region at the border of order and chaos, where the frozen starts melting and the chaotic congeals. This is where self-organisation occurs, where emergence happens, liquid, dynamic and non-deterministic. This is the region where creativity emerges, where life evolves and innovation happens. Emergence, probably the easiest way of defining emergence, and so much so that it's something of a cliche. Emergence is where the whole is more than the sum of the parts. An emergent property or behaviour is one in which an accumulation of physical elements has qualitatively different outcomes. As the philosopher Morgan in 1923 says, the emergent step is best regarded as a qualitative change of direction or turning point in the course of events. This is when 1 + 1 stops equaling 2 and starts equaling apples, to use Kevin Kelly's phrase, where a brain cell plus a brain cell up to nth brain cell equals thinking or consciousness, where a bird plus a bird and so on equals a flock, where a person plus a person and so on equals culture or a crowd. The point here is that qualitative phenomenon emerges from a quantitative act. You get together a bunch of people under certain conditions and crowding happens, or maybe even rioting. How this happens is worth investigating. There are approaches to thinking how this happens that are called holistic or reductionist. But I won't talk about those here today. The philosopher Manuel de Landa says that the spontaneous emergence of order out of chaos, but it isn't quite this simple. And from what's gone before, we may also say that emergence also needs spontaneous dissolution into chaos. Emergence happens at the border of order and chaos, and life occurs when we fold in and out of the two regions. Deep in the ordered regime, the laws of thermodynamics rule in such a way that life, the creative moment where more comes from less and escapes, should not be able to happen. As Michel Serres says here, a physical system is isolated or closed, and under this condition and this condition only, the two laws of thermodynamics apply and are valid. And I emphasise, with the slightest opening, the system is no longer governed by general equations. But life has evolved. Life has sprung from systems moved towards the edge of chaos. The biologist Kaufman says, living systems exist in a solid regime near the edge of chaos, although he also calls it a liquid regime later on in this book. So once the isolated or closed system is opened, generalities no longer apply, and special strange conditions need to be taken into consideration. So for creativity to be allowed to emerge, it's necessary that a closed system in the deep ordered regime is opened. Self-organisation needs the edge of chaos in order to thrive. Now, how might this be of relevance to innovation? Innovation, Sir George Cox says, is the successful exploitation of new ideas. This innovation funnel, ordering creative output from research departments through a well-defined and hierarchical stage gate process via development into market. This is the standard model of innovation, the model used by most organisations, the model used in new product development. But with more than 90% of new products failing in the first year, one wonders whether this is a successful model. A model that Chesbrough, in his book called Open Innovation, also calls closed innovation. The open operates closer to the edge of chaos, where some of the controls of the former are unfrozen and once impervious walls are made more porous. Stage gates still filter, but the rejects can find a new life outside, and ideas can filter in. However, the open paradigm is still, I would say, a little closer to the closed than the chaotic. It's not quite in the emergent region where self-organisation is promoted. Control over the open process is still an important issue, in that the fruits of the activities need to be largely channeled back through the traditional organisational structures. We aren't yet free of the limitation of deterministic laws, but as Prigogine, the chemist, says here, this means that we go from a universe that is closed, in which all is given, to one that is open to fluctuations, to innovations. But maybe before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we need to remember that openness isn't everything. Which is something that many philosophical extremists in the Deleuze and Guattari camp forget in championing the work of these two philosophers. While Deleuze and Guattari offer liberatory expressions in openness, smoothness, rhizomes and many more things, ranging against the totalitarian, closed, striated or arboreal, they're some of their words. They also say this: never think that a smooth space is sufficient to save us. There are moments when, to get something done, it's necessary to fold back the smooth onto the striated, to gather the chaotic into islands of order, and, as Guattari says in a little work of his called The Three Ecologies, to draw differences together in common cause and act like little militants. Innovators need to remember that a purely chaotic, totally open innovation isn't going to get anything done. Openness alone won't save us. Control is necessary in transforming chaotic energies into innovation. But this control also needs to be self-organising. It must be allowed to dissolve as quickly as it arises and not be an end in itself. And this would demand a further relinquishing of control by the organisations who want to be innovative, and more trust placed in local relationships, operating in a supportive context. A flock of birds operates with each bird following two simple instructions. Don't get too far from your neighbours and don't get too close. And all this in relation to their context. The challenge for the innovator is to articulate an open context for the creativity close to chaos, with simple initial conditions, and also to ensure that the mist of untrammeled energy can coalesce into something with impact. From this complex, dynamic creative outcomes will emerge. Life, any act of creativity, evolution, are all testament to the fact that closed or isolated systems can be forced open, that the universe's drive towards thermodynamic equilibrium and heat death can be unpicked. As Kaufman says here, I want to suggest that we can think of the origin of life as an expected emergent collective property which can catalyse one another's formation. Life, creativity, cultures, thoughts, all these emerge from a mixture in a context. Finding the right context and mixture is important and becomes very important for the innovator wanting to develop a team or a culture of innovation. But I also like this last clause. Catalyse one another's formation. Life is that which develops the conditions for the possibility of other life or other creativity to emerge. So individual creativity is not the only important aspect when it comes to considering how to engender emergent creativity. In pushing systems to the boundary between order and chaos, but ensuring that creativity also abounds in others, that any creative act is one which allows others' creativity to emerge. This is key. While we may not know exactly how the past and the present will emerge into the future, we can promote the contexts and connections within systems and the general tendency of any system towards the edge of chaos, to ensure that whatever does emerge will be creative in itself and in its relations to others. And there, I finish. Thank you very much for listening.